Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host. Today is March 2nd, and with us this evening is Mr. Rodney Cleaves, who is one of 4 candidates for the job of selectman. So just a little bit of background for the viewers. We have the annual municipal election that is coming up the first week in April. And this year, the selectman's race is a 1-seat race as opposed to a 2-seat race. So it runs 2-2-1. That's the cycle. We have 5 people on the select board. So we have the 1-seat race this year, and we have the incumbent who has chosen to seek re-election for a 3rd term, and we have 3 challenges. So Rod is one of 3 challenges. So that is the background. So Rod, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for inviting me, Sam.
Oh, you're very welcome. And what we usually do before we get into the discussion, we ask the guests to spend between 1 and 2 minutes giving us a brief biographical sketch, whatever you feel comfortable talking about as it may relate to your candidacy. So with that said, go ahead.
Oh, how do I keep it short? Grew up in Maine, went into the Air Force, learned electronics engineering, then computer science, then made a switch into theology, but in the end, not graduated, retired or escaped from the Veterans Administration after 22 years. Was the Chief Information Officer there when I left. So I have had kind of an eclectic career. And I think the main thing that I'm most proud about is that when my wife and I blended our families here in Chelmsford in 1994, we opted to start hosting foster children. And I think if there's anything I've done in my life that's the most important is we've adopted 2 of those children, and we hosted nearly 500 foster children. Those are DCF's numbers, not mine. In fact, I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
So over a roughly 29-year period, you've hosted approximately 500 foster children.
I say nearly 500 because the numbers are inconclusive. And I would say about 15 or 20 of them are very closely held. In fact, I call them son and daughter, and they call me dad. I've married 3 of them. Not myself personally, of course, but was able to perform the ceremonies for them. And we still keep in touch. And if we count all of the kids we have had closely held and their kids, so my own natural grandchildren along with step-grandchildren and closely held foster grandchildren, we're just touching on about 40 grandchildren at this point and 2 great-grandchildren. And for a man as young as me, I think that's quite an accomplishment.
I would say so. Very few people can claim that level of accomplishment with regard to children, grandchildren, and so forth. So how long have you lived in Chelmsford?
Well, I moved here in 1994.
94, you did say that. Okay.
So I moved to Massachusetts in 1980. And I spent a few months in Marlborough while I looked for a house, and then moved to Maynard. And Maynard's a beautiful little town, and I actually loved it.
You had some political background in Maynard as well.
I did. Maynard had an ad hoc zoning board at the time. I think it's been dissolved. It met whenever it needed to. And I was on the planning board, and I was on the zoning board of appeals. And I loved my time there. But then I also fell in love with this lady named Elaine. And she had a nicer house in Chelmsford than I did in Maynard. So we decided to blend our families here. And like I said, and then circumstances took me out of local politics. But now I'm back in because I've always thirsted to be more and more involved. And so now it's time to get back into it. We're more or less empty nesters.
Okay.
We've got 1 child still at home, and we're hosting a homeless family, but they're on their own basically. We just have them in the house.
So, with that as a backdrop, so now you've decided to enter the fray into local politics
Yes.
and to go for the top executive position in town. So that begs the question, why are you running at this time?
The best question in the world and the first one always asked, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You might as well ask me why I wanted to play football in high school,
I'm not going to ask that.
or why I went into electronics or the Air Force. We go into things of any type because we have an interest, we feel we can do well, we feel we're qualified, and we know we're going to give it our passion when we do it. I was heavily involved, like I said, in Maynard politics. And as you well know, I ran for state representative last summer. I was thoroughly vanquished. You had Simon on your show at one point.
Yes.
He beat me. But I'm a Republican running in Massachusetts, so I didn't expect much. But it got me really...
That indicates a level of courage all by itself, being a Republican in Massachusetts.
Perhaps so. I've been a Republican since 1968.
There you go.
So never changed my stripes, although changed my point of view from time to time on different topics. But what I found with that race, I got really thirsty for talking to people and trying to understand their points of view, even when they differed with mine, and share my point of view. We've had a number of coffees in my run for select board where we just sit and chat, about anything. It could be the town. And one thing I noticed this time around, this is not a partisan seat. This is about the town, not about the politics. When I was running for state representative, everybody wanted to know my views on abortion and, border immigration, this kind of thing. And these are not questions that are germane to a select board seat. I mean, as people well know, and actually I've met some people that don't understand this, the select board is a policy and oversight board. You called it the executive position.
Correct.
I don't think in reality that's correct, although in the charter it is. The town manager has operational oversight, day-to-day oversight. The select board helps select the town manager, and they approve or continue his contract as time goes on, as it comes. They also approve people that the town manager wants to bring in as employees, and a good example is the town clerk. Tricia's a great town clerk. And the select board has a little bit of oversight in appointing and controlling, not controlling necessarily, but overseeing some of the boards and committees like the agriculture board or the registrar's board, this kind of thing. There's a few others. But most of them are actually controlled and appointed by the town manager. So the select board is really what I call the cheerleaders of the town. The city members may disagree with that, but we're the face of the town, and we have to be above reproach. We have to be confident in our points of view. We have to be accessible. So the select board, and I've had many, many years of management experience and a consensus builder and did my best to bring people together as part of a consensus. So the select board is that thing that I wanted to do. That's about all I can say.
Well, that's a fair answer, and that's kind of a lead into another question that's related to that. As I said at the beginning of the show, this is a one-seat race. So if the incumbent elects to run for re-election, so you are now running against an incumbent person who has a record in the job. So the question I would ask you, and I would ask anybody in this particular dynamic, is why do you feel at this time why do you feel you want to run now against an incumbent who actually has an established track record in the job?
I love the way you phrased that. It was perfect. The incumbent is a good man, and he and I see eye to eye on almost everything. So then that begs the question, why am I even here? The information I had early in the race was that Ken was not going to be running again. And so I took out papers and I decided to run because I wanted someone who was like-minded to be in there if he wasn't going to be taking the seat. And at the last minute, he decided he did in fact want to run. Basically, I say more the merrier. Welcome, Ken Lefebvre. I'm glad you're in the race. But that's really what it comes down to. I mean, so I thought it was going to just be me and one other person. And we have another gentleman whom I've met, who's very comfortable being in the limelight and cares very much about Chelmsford, like we all do. And so that's where the fourth person comes from. And I hope he does well, but not as well as me.
Well, there's only going to be one person who's elected.
I know. But I have no issues
If
with
one vote separates you from the winner, will you ask for a recount?
No. I can't
so
see
that's-
doing that.
that's-
Well, I might. One vote,
Well, I'll tell you.
maybe we do.
I'm glad you said that because that's exactly how I feel. Okay, office that I've run for, I always said if the other guy beats me by one vote, he's got the job. Okay, but that is a very uncommon point of view for a political candidate to have. So that's I like your answer.
Well, my knee jerk is to say no.
Yeah.
But after 2020, I have some questions, but I don't think we have a problem with that in this town.
You mean as far as the vote
As far
integrity
as
is concerned?
voter difficulties, voting fraud, that kind of thing. I'm pretty confident that Tricia has everything under control.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
I've participated in the town elections. Actually, had 2 times as a warden, as a poll warden, and I can tell you, from my perspective, that the elections are run extremely competently, and I would agree with your assessment that there is no indication whatsoever of
mine either.
fraud or even error, to be frank. So I think the citizens of Chelmsford can be very, very confident and comfortable in the fact that the elections are administered correctly and fairly. So that's good. So getting a little bit, you did touch upon this a minute ago in your answer. You talked a little bit about the role of the select board, the role of the town manager, and so forth. And with regard, and of course that's all outlined in the governing structure of the town, which is the town charter. So would you care to expand a little bit upon how you see that particular relationship going, the select board and the town manager? Obviously they have to work together. So you started off by saying that you felt that the select board was more of a policy board.
No,
So why don't we
pretty much what the town charter says.
That is exactly what it says. So why don't we start from that standpoint? Maybe you can expand on that a little bit and describe how you would operate as a member of the select board in working with the town manager.
Well, I'll tell you this. While I was collecting signatures for my nomination and while I've been knocking on doors and meeting people, I've heard a lot of things about the contentious attitude between the select board and the town manager. And they seem to be all this or all that. There's nobody that's looking here. And while I'm not necessarily a middle-of-the-road guy, but I tend to try and drive the middle of the road, everything I hear from me at this point is just information gathering. I had a very nice meeting with Mr. Cohen. I was very impressed with everything he had to say, and I've always been impressed with everything he's had to say. And then I hear various people talking like this, and I hear the words, but I don't always understand what they're saying. But you know what? Let's assume for a moment that the town manager is the employee of the select board, which isn't entirely accurate, but let's just work on that.
Actually, it is 100% accurate.
Well, well,
according to the charter.
well, according to the charter, they select him out of a pool of candidates, and then once he has his contract signed, he's pretty much the operational manager of the town. And the select board writes a review annually, but it doesn't affect him until his contract runs out. I've had employees, and I was an employee myself for years. I mean, I worked at Data General for years when I was started off as an employee and became a supervisor. And when I became a supervisor, one of the first pieces of wisdom I was given was hire people that are smarter than you. And to be honest with you, at 25 years old, I didn't entirely understand what he was telling me. Now I do. I think the select board hired a good man who's really fit for the job. Now, he's not going to do everything that everybody wants him to do. It's never going to be that way. And you're never going to find anyone who will do it.
You love your wife, right?
Usually.
Okay, do you always, do you and your wife always agree?
No, but I do always love her.
All right, so I mean, you know, people have to keep that in mind, you know,
Well, that's the
when
point.
they're evaluating an employee.
Well, that's the
okay?
point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you're picking up on what I'm saying.
Right.
Not everybody's going to do everything perfectly. Not every evaluation's going to come. I know when I was at the VA one year, I got a stellar evaluation, got a huge bonus my very first year there. My second year, I sucked. And it wasn't that I didn't do anything.
Same boss?
Same boss.
Okay.
It wasn't that I had done anything differently. The mission had changed a little, and I wasn't keeping up with it, and I had to learn. Are there going to be times when Mr. Cohen does everything right according to what the select board wants? No. But you know what? I'd say he's my personal opinion is he's working at a strong B+, A- range. So, but I do see and hear about the contention. I think that's what you're focusing on here, if I'm not too inaccurate. But I'm not going to make any. Everybody's talking about whether or not we should renew his contract. That seems to be the thing. I'm not making any decisions one way or the other until I get more information. And some of that information might come from executive sessions that the public isn't privy to. Some of it is from
Well,
what
you've got to work with the man for a while.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
that is absolute. That makes
You know,
absolute sense.
I'm not going to hit the ground on day one as the senior member of the select board.
That's exactly right.
So I hope that answers your question. I hope that answers the.
Well, now you've answered another question we had prepared, and which was essentially how do you rate the manager's performance, and you've answered that I think pretty well and very. Very.
Didn't mean to take a question out of your mouth.
No, that's perfectly fine, and you've been quite specific on that. So, and it's not difficult when you've got an employee who's been with the town now for 17 years, which is actually kind of unusual in terms of town manager tenure. You know, they don't tend to last that long, but well, a few have in the area. So, moving on from that question. Do you have in mind any specific areas or initiatives that you would like to bring forward as assuming that you gain this position, you know, in terms of visionary type things for the town?
That's a tough one.
It is. That's why I asked the question.
Good one. I'm not sure I'd rate myself as a visionary. I'm a solid manager. And I look at what's in front of me. I take care of what's there and then worry about the next step later. I think the one thing that I'm worried about is Chelmsford is at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. We're obviously on the confluence of 495 and Route 3 and 129 and Route 40, and we are a crossroads. We're a pass-through community. People live in Carlisle and drive through Chelmsford to get to work in Nashua, and vice versa. We have an awful lot of heavy traffic, and I'm not really certain what we can do about that. I met with the head of the DPW and tried to gather some information about what's going to possibly be done. And there is money being set aside from the state to take care of the state routes. There is money being set aside from the state to fix the, the overpass on Route 3A in sort of East Chelmsford, really, into Lowell that goes over 495 is in desperate need of work. And I know that DPW is arranging for more money to come for that. We're also at a crossroads in that when I moved here 29 years ago, aside from the fact that I was moving in with a new wife, I really liked that Chelmsford was a provincial, small New England town. I really did. At the time, you could come up, I was living in Maynard, I would come up Route 27 and make a left onto Route 110, there behind the Adams Library before the Rotary went in. And that's how I would get to visit my family in Maine. And I always thought to myself, this is a nice little town. I like the way it looks. I like the traffic patterns. It all makes sense.
Just for the record, when you moved here in 1994, the population of the town was just about 33,000 and change. So not, at that point, the 18th largest municipality in the state, just for the record.
Okay. It didn't seem that way.
Well, see, and the reason I bring that up, and it's interesting that you bring it up, because I see that all the time on the social media. You know, people come and say, well, Chelmsford's is small. No, we're not a small town.
No,
okay?
not by any means.
It may, for some people, have the feel of a small town.
I didn't say small.
Okay.
I said provincial.
Provincial, but you're technically you're absolutely right. But for most people, when they hear the word provincial, they think small. Okay.
Well, I mean,
So-
no, it's not like you're heading out to the, like the
Correct.
Quabbin Reservoir area with
Yeah.
some of the smaller towns.
We're
like that.
not, a less provincial town would be a town closer to the city of Boston, for example.
If you look at how Chelmsford's laid out, we have we basically have three centers in Chelmsford. We have the historic central Chelmsford district. We have Vinyl Square, of course,
Right.
which is practically a town of its own. It's got its own zip code. And then what we tend to forget about is Kate's Corner, down in South Chelmsford. It's named after a lady named Kate who bought that variety store a year before I moved here. I thought it had always been called Kate's Corner. But and these two areas are like this far apart, and you can drive through them. But it's the trying to think of the term. It's the edges of Chelmsford where most of the residents are. I mean, you look over in parts of East Chelmsford, South Chelmsford. They have all the developments, that were built up
Right.
over the years, and that's why when I came through here in 1994, I saw this cute town,
Right.
going through from the top of Route 127 to 495, and thinking this is back when Dunkin' Donuts was making their own donuts right there in the store.
Right.
And then when I met Elaine and moved here, I thought I was very privileged to move to Chelmsford. And but what do I want to do as a specific initiative? Somehow we got to find a way to preserve who we are with what we must become. Stifling progress is going to kill the town. You die if you don't move forward. But by the same token, I still want to see traditional New England buildings in central Chelmsford, not condominiums, but some are already there. I want to see an old church that I know is a New England church. We have, say, the Unitarian Church in what we used to call Suicide Corners. And we have the Chelmsford Community Center for the Arts right across the street. Up in North Chelmsford, we've got the old town hall up there. These are the buildings I'd like to see preserved and protected, maybe even place them on the historical register. But there are also sections of town along the 129 corridor, what we now call Chelmsford Crossing. There's areas up in North Chelmsford that are industrial and commercial. I've got no problems taking a good look at them and seeing if we can either improve them in some fashion or possibly even repurpose them for other cleaner industries that would be more compatible with the town. If there was one thing I'd love to do, but I don't think it's going to happen, would be to stop the traffic that's on Ledge Road up in North Chelmsford, coming from the aggregate and sand place. The name escapes me, and I do apologize. It's Millstone Industries, is that it? Or they're over the line in Westford. and they send their backdoor traffic out through
You're talking about the asphalt plant?
the asphalt.
Yes.
Their asphalt goes out the front door,
Right.
onto Route 40, onto Groton Road. Their aggregate and sand goes out the back door. through
This is a very difficult problem, and
Well,
it's exacerbated by two things. Number one, it's a public road, so you have a very difficult time restricting access. And two, the source of the problem is from another town.
Exactly.
And we have absolutely no control over what happens or what originates in Westford. And this has been a
And the select board
source of-
devoted an entire meeting to it just a few weeks ago.
Well, over the years, they've
Oh,
devoted a considerable amount of time.
Several meetings, yes.
Over the years, starting with the startup operation of the asphalt plant. This has been a problem. So I think you're in good shape in terms of intent and wanting to try to do something for that. And who knows? It's a difficult.
Maybe I can knock on someone's door one night
Well,
and say, can we have a cup of coffee?
That's
Or better yet,
That's how most of this type of work is done.
Oh, I know.
Okay, as
I
you
think-
well know.
I don't know if this is one of your questions coming up or not, but I'm going to tell you, I think the strength of the select board, I called it a cheerleader for the town a little while ago. The real strength of the elect board is the leadership assignments that each member gets. Each select board
The
member.
liaison assignment.
Liaison. Misspoke. Well, as you well know, each member gets anywhere from 8 to 12 boards and committees to reach out to. And I think that's where the real strength of the select board comes. Because it's really the only way that the select board can sort of reach out to other parts of the town. Otherwise, you have if you were to look at the budget for the town, the very first page has what is effectively a flow chart of how the committees
Correct.
and boards and whatnot work with each other. You have the town manager, and then a straight line down to, everybody else who reports to him. The select board's more or less off to the side. The select board is one of the few committees, few boards, that actually can reach out to other boards, legitimately reach out. And while they're not voting members on these boards and committees, they can at least have a presence and make their ideas known and gather ideas to bring back to the select board.
That's a very good point. And we've got a couple minutes left. I want to very, very quickly get your take on a split tax rate for the town.
I got to be honest with you. I'm in the process of changing my mind.
That's fair enough.
I'm
I
undecided.
know you have a lot of the material that was
I
sent
do.
to you, and
do.
that's a lot to digest.
It is a lot to digest, and I've been talking to other people, some like-minded, some, one of the best parts about having become a junior politician, if you will, is I'm not afraid of talking to people who disagree with me. And
That's very important.
at first, I was totally in favor of the split tax when I first heard about it, because I, as a homeowner here in Chelmsford, as my house gets more and more expensive, I want to pay fewer and fewer taxes.
Correct.
And but there's a couple things about that. I really haven't noticed my tax going down. As I understand it, the split tax right now on my particular house saves me about $170 a year,
That's probably
give or take.
that's probably pretty accurate.
And
yes.
yet the other side of the split tax, where we charge corporate a little bit more money, what is it, 0.25 extra?
We're at
1.25?
120 now, 20%.
Okay, 20%, sorry.
It's okay.
You're on the Board of Assessors, you know better
Yes.
than I would. I've known from decades of experience, corporations don't pay tax. Corporations pass all their extra expenditures on to the people that are buying there. So here I am saving a little bit of money, but if I buy something from a corporation who's based in Chelmsford, let's say I go down to that new deli.
You're going to
on
pay
Route
the
129.
tax.
I'm going to
because
pay it there.
All corporate costs are passed on to the person who buys the good or the service.
Yeah, if I kept careful check,
I'm going to cut you off because you have 20 seconds to look at that camera and quickly ask for the vote.
simple enough.
Go right ahead.
Please vote for me. I love this town ever since I moved in, and I want to take as good a care of it as I would my own daughter.
Well, that is about the shortest ask for the vote I think I've ever heard, but very effective. Rod, thank you very much for appearing. Good show.